an opportunity to remember the importance of the insertion of the regions of this country. Chile, from the point of view, commercial point of view, is a country that looks in all directions. It shows our export tradition. We also have important commerce with Asia. China is our main destination of our exportation. We also have very good trade relations with North America, and it's an also important source of foreign investment in our countries, not just the United States of America, but also Canada. We also have our eyes on Europe, and sometimes we forget about Latin America. And from the point of view of our energetic relations, Latin America is fundamental for us, and our neighbor relations have a very important component based on energy. We just have to consider the importance of the offer of the natural gas from Argentina. And we also have to remember the interest that we have as a state with the interconnection of the electric interconnection with Peru, and in a way we are able to connect to the Andes network of the electric energy. So for us, regarding the energy relations, our neighborly relations with Latin America are very important and essential. But also we have to keep in mind that the energy cannot be considered only as from a technical point of view. Historically, we thought that the energy was a point reserved for the specialists in energy. And it was an issue very distant to exterior politics, foreign politics. And nowadays we are realizing that energy is at the center of the international relations and foreign relations of almost every country. And the issues such as price of the oil, the gas supply, or availability of the strategic minerals are not just topics that are based on the market rules. They're also defining the alliances. They can create tensions among countries. They can reflect certain insecurities of certain important countries, and they can also mark the agenda of the main powers in the world. If we're talking about the United States, the Europe, Russia, China, all those important players at the international level. And in a scenario of geopolitical increasing competence, the great decision, energetic decision, stops just being the sector issue, and it becomes a central element of the configuration of the powers for the next decades. Countries are talking about supply chains of lithium, of copper. They're talking about hydrogen. And the debates about these topics are being developed at the same spaces where we negotiate business agreements, sustainability, and safety agreements. So for Chile, the challenge is clear. It's to understand that we need to avoid fragmentation, reduce vulnerability vulnerabilities, and above all, to create common rules that are going to provide predictable investment and access to energy. And this needs a very robust state of law. In Latin America and Caribbean, talking about energetic transitions in plural is acknowledging that there is not just one way and one path to follow. Each country can define their own route based on their potential, based on their resources, based on their capacities and priorities. For some of the countries, the future happens through the solar energy or wind energy. For other countries, it could be hydraulic energy or through natural gas. And at least from the transition point of view. And then we have countries that have relevant potential in geothermic matter. So, for this picture, we should also add other elements. Some of those have already been mentioned in a previous panel, such as artificial intelligence applied to the network application, cyber safety, and critical infrastructure. And in our region, the realities are very diverse. And this diversity is a strength from the point of view of Latin America. It allows us to learn one from another, to exchange good practices, and on top of all, to complement our matrices. And I think that Chile is a very good example for that. And this plurality, what is getting us together is moving towards sustainable development, low emissions of the greenhouse gases, and but at the same time guaranteeing the energetic safety for our communities. So energetic transition also should create new sources of employment, incorporating women and young people, and especially the area where the energy is being produced, as well as critical minerals, and also dialogues with the citizens that live in those areas is necessary, and we can see that especially in the areas that have as much potential as lithium. And from the point of view of our international participation, multilateralism continues being the ruling principle and a very complete tool. Chile promotes multilateralism. We had an opportunity to talk about it with talking about our participation in the General Assembly of the United Nations, and we could also express our interest in having rules that are clear and that we can continue ruling ourselves with these common rules that allow us to plan investment, share the risk, and ensure the transition. And in this very tense situation with many conflicts, including the wars, our region has an opportunity to show to face these challenges. Such energetic solutions can only be faced successfully when we are working together. And from this point of view, a body such as OLADE is taking a very high importance, because we believe that OLADE, together with the banks, multilateral for the increase and development banks, Banco de Desarrollo, have a very central role in the development of our countries, so that they can move toward the energetic transition, toward the cleaner energy. And we believe that it's being done in an efficient way. In Latin America and the Caribbean offer undoubtable advantages regarding the energy. Our energy matrix is relatively cleaner than of other countries. And we also have vast renewable resources, great richness in minerals, and biodiversity that makes us think about responsible development. But all this abundance does not guarantee the leadership, because we need to have a coordination, a strategic vision, physical integration, and rules and regulations, so that we can consider these assets in an integration and shared energetic development and higher competitiveness. In this perspective, electric interconnection and the electric providers and the flexibility that we provide with the energy storage, they become the resilience policies that optimize the resources, reduce the cost, and improve the system response in the case of contingencies. And to that, we also have to add different regional tests, response protocols for coordinated response to face or to approach complex events, and also early response to the digital threats that can affect our networks. And with over 5 decades of the experience, OLADE also offers a proper framework to articulate these responses. So this 10th week of energy is not just an important date to mark, but it's an occasion to have this shared path and to promote our region as a reference in the global transition. And based on all that, when we have these dialogues and this dialogue opportunity where we share our experiences and create mutual dialogues, and our reference for these actions regarding the energetic matter, it's efficient multilateralism and clear rules, coherence in between the climatic action and development, fair transition and territorial inclusion, safety and resilience, physical and digital, and interconnection of our networks, and the responsible governance of the critical minerals, and also development toward clear energy and certainty about the development. All of these are different elements that affect development, that affect development of the region, and this energy is also propelling our Ministry of Energy, but is also having all the support from our chancellorship and from the Latin America and Caribbean. We are focusing on the quality quality of our public policies and the strength in development and desire to cooperate. And so I expect that the regional cooperation is determining, because we have to build the trust between our countries to share the information and work more efficiently. We need a practical agenda that is going to be realistic and easily available to evaluate, and that we can work toward decarbonization and the regional development based on good shared practices. And from our country, we are also confirming a long-term perspectives where we are going to strengthen our frameworks and the low regional cooperation and boosting our local dialogue where each country can independently decide how they are going to work. So this 10th week of energy, we hope, is going to leave that signal, because our region is not just observing the global energy transition, but it's also becoming important participant in this social development and the implementation of this energetic transition, global transition. And this is the objective that Chile has. So thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias al señor canciller.
Thank you, Councillor. And to continue with the session, we're going to open the discussion panel. And for that, I'm going to welcome Dorotea Lopez, Director of the panel, and she works in the Institute for International Studies. And she's going to lead the conversation with the panelists. And also Jaime Baeza, professor from the Faculty of Latin American and Social Sciences in Ecuador, of PhD in Political Sciences in Essex University, and also Masters in Latin American Studies in the University of Yorkshire. And also we have Astrid Casabo, coordinator of research of the Observatory in Latin America for Geopolitics and Energy, and a PhD in International Relations by the University of Rio de Janeiro, and also working in energy integration at a regional level. Thank you. Thank you. First, I'd like to greet everyone that is joining us today, and I'd like to congratulate Olade because, as I was pointing out earlier, the minister clearly, in terms of energy and energy matters, they go beyond technical comprehension that at some point was locked. And I think that for that, it's really important to have this type of panel on the political keys in global transition. And here we have two wonderful panelists that were already introduced, and both of them have a long trajectory. And, well, because we have limited time, we're going to start with the questions. Astrid, thank you for joining us, Astrid. I wanted to ask, can you share like a general framework on global politics? Can you introduce to the panel very briefly so that we can talk about matters on energy and the project that you're currently doing? Thank you, Dorotea. Thank you, Jaime, Nade, and everyone that is joining us here. I'd like to congratulate you for such a wonderful event. And I wanted to thank you for the possibility of talking and sharing what we have been able to research with the colleagues from the university and research groups, and while responding to what Dorotea is asking on the geopolitical keys for global transition, I think it's really interesting because first we need to recognize what is happening in the international system, which is characterized by tensions between traditional powers and emerging powers, between a lack of trust, uncertainty, and the regional blocs that try to position in the international system in different dimensions, such as political power, economical power, and commercial power, military power. And, in all of these dimensions, energy is key, because energy is a structured variable, and it has been so in other energy transitions. In the 20th century, we have been able to see that very clearly, and it will continue to be so, as energy is so important for the construction of capacities, and also for the accumulation of wealth and power. And we may say that geopolitical keys, well, one of them, at least from our region perspective, would be elaborating a strategy facing that scenario, such as an equal scenario, changing scenario, which is what we're currently seeing. And if we could characterize what is considered as a current transition, with several dimensions and point of views from academics, from government, and from the business world, we may say that we cannot say that oil will be a source that is less important. We may say that it's a source that is even more important than at other times, than other types of decades. And there's actually an amount of sources that are emerging and that have a potential, such as hydrogen and wind power, and also solar power. And there's lots of disputes between sources between oil and sources that come from hydrocarbon. And we may say that we could call or mention energy transition as a space for dispute between regions, a concept that is multidimensional, and that we may say that there's deep implications in our region, because traditionally we have supplied raw material and also strategic resources, so we are positioned in a different manner, so that we can have the implementation and also using policies in the global scenario that is described. Thank you. Thank you for going back to this idea of having a region with a common voice, and also for Olade, that's really important. Beyond all systemic rivalries, energy transition, and something that you have mentioned in some conversations. Considering the effects of the war, how are they relevant to consider global transition, and how accelerated are ongoing processes? Well, first and foremost, I'd like to greet our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he's also part of our university, part of the academic community, and it's the other way around. He's a professor from the University of Chile, and now he's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And also, I would like to greet Olade, thank you for the invitation, and also thanking you for allowing me to explain what's happening here, because when we talk about military civil relations, what happens with international safety, defense, security, what is this guy doing here, you may ask. But the thing is that along with energy transition, we are in a transition of the global system on how we understand the global order. That's why international affairs talks about the international community, and we may define that way, but that transformation, people like Richard Hassel and the House of Foreign Relations, they have been talking about it for a long time. The introduction to the New World. And when we talk about energy transition and the international framework where we develop this, it's not only changing, but it's something that we'll never cease to understand. So, some people say we'll have a global order in this matter, but what is the energy world doing here? We talked about that with other people from the business world, where when the Ukraine war started, they would ask, what do you think? It's going to be a long war. Okay, that's too much, people have to pay their bills, so they say now it's going to be a long war because that will help them to, sell fear. But then a while later, say, hey, right? And it said, the war will have a limited effect on the oil price. Why? Well, the reason global order is not compact, is not organized as 15 years, 20 years ago. So international sanctions don't have the same effect, and we see that on oil price today. Why? Because Russia is selling to India, to China. So in that context, we need to understand the new global order to understand how prices will be, what will be the order where production will be developed and will be related in terms of the capacity for exports and for quotations in matters of oil, because we see that by the end of the year, the OPEC will increase dramatically the amount of oil production. And so in that context, the war, such as the Ukraine war, what it shows is the weaknesses of the system. And I'll end up here, so I don't bore you too much. But for example, the case of Europe, where Gerhard Schröder, the former chancellor in Germany, everyone was looking at that. When Angela Merkel, she was renouncing to nuclear energy, but then we went from depending on 40% of Russian oil in 2021 to less than 10% because of the war. So that forced other markets to open. And so that means the war as a phenomenon came back. It's going to stay, like it or not. And countries like ours, we need to learn how to deal and how to live with that. And we also need to learn to understand that the rules that were part of the public and private sector, we were thinking about, I miss the 90s, the 2000s, it was such an organized world. Well, it's no longer like that. And we need to learn how to live with that. And we need to learn how to understand the structures of war is something that explains what's happening today. It's something that was maybe not as relevant 15, 20 years ago. So that's me trying to explain that a little. Thank you, Jaime, for this calling to understand, these organizations so that we can organize ourselves. And, this new concept, it's being so used, the armed interdependency. Well, I came up without a watch, but I cannot look at the time to see how far are we. Okay, so we still have time. We'll now go to the next question. Dr. Casalbon, I'd like to ask you, this new having, Latin America joining the green global chains, chain of supply. We talk about how difficult or dangerous it is to depend on others in terms of our resources. So, what can you share about that? Thank you. It's such an interesting question, and especially because now we're talking about Latin America, energy in Latin America. And I have heard in every panel talking about holistic emission and about energy policy, about the energy interconnection, in even energy interconnection, but we still need a strategic view. And we need to, if we look at the latest website, we see the definition on some energy strategies in the region. And at least, doing some research is the only time I have found that term energy strategy in a document from an institution within a regional order, even if it's intergovernmental. When it comes to a regional order, that is key for the industry because, as Dorothea said, we've always been depending traditionally. We've depended on imports, machinery, products, and even now this is discussed, the imports on solar panels or wind power plants, while some industries exist in the region, at least when it comes to oil, nuclear, hydroelectric, we still really depend on external funding. So to have a better positioning in that scenario, what we really need are energy strategies that actually consider the planning in the long term, that actually consider a regional strategy. And looking at Latin America and South America and the sub-regions that make up Latin America, such as the Latina Basin or the Andean region, or Colombia, Venezuela, and different areas that have different ways of connecting regionally, and having different characteristics. But if we consider a regional strategy that considers Latin America as a whole space, and despite having heterogeneity in different areas of development, what we have in common is that, what Dorothea mentioned, big levels of import, the dependency, and as we can create and keep our institutions for regional integration, and what Andres mentioned as well, having an agreement, having a regulation agreement that is regional. I don't remember there was some other word there, but our convergency, our regional convergence, so that countries can truly integrate their energy systems and looking at energy as a whole, as a system, so that countries can do that, avoiding all these tensions and conflicts that traditionally were part of our regions, or conflicts that involve more than one country. So to avoid this, we want to regulate the sectors, and we want to go back and consider our energy resources in a strategic manner. Everything that's not only what is essential in energy transition, but also in hydrocarbons, which is something we have all heard about, and well, that's what I wanted to share. Thank you. Thank you, Astrid. Jaime, now, going, discussing on your matters of expertise, safety, security, what happens with the green global chains. What do you see in terms of, the lack of supply infrastructure, things that we usually face in Latin America? Well, here's three things that we need to consider. First, we are a peripheral region, much more than 30, 40 years ago. That was an issue. When there's a global order after World War II, Latin America was present, not only in terms of international rights, but Latin America had a voice in that post-war world because they were invited to the UN. And so today, there's no relevant voice in the global order for that effect. So that's a reality. First. And second, since there's no relevant voice, we cannot ask for as many conditions as we wished. Maybe we could create an effort or have isolated efforts in Chile and Mexico. And sometimes when national regionalism is not as popular. So
mejores condiciones en un mundo donde la cadena de suministros tiene amenazas súper concretas. Por ejemplo, el Océano Pacífico.
Pacific Ocean.
El lugar más peligroso del mundo,
I'm sorry, we have some connection issues. We go from piracy and from, human trafficking, and that means that sometimes, countries are working in different plans.
Sino que puedan enfrentar esos riesgos de un mundo
and we could face other risks that are fractions where many stakeholders want to impose certain conditions. In terms of functioning, and India, China, the US, they all have different rollouts according to all of this. So the US Army, etc. So superpowers have a deployment where we are not present. And now in terms of threats, we have institutions that many times can deal with this kinetic infrastructure, but they have deficiencies when facing, cyber infrastructure, which has a kinetic effect, of course, because they are affected. Real installations are affected, but from a remote place where you don't know what are remote regulations in that country. So in terms of energy provision, that can be very risky, very complicated. So that's where in this fractioning and in this lack of multilateral regional dialogue, we are not making progress in these fundamental issues. Not think about 20 years ahead. So that's where we have a pending challenge. And we can talk about concepts that were already discussed in the 2000s and 90s, population security, operative security. We're not talking about, things that some people talked about, Art of Wagner, that in the 90s, building security after World War. We're talking about basic corporations that seek security, where my security depends on what happens in other countries. So this is not even a interconnection. It's just saying that the effects of an attack at some place have effects on the entire region, and there's no multilateral dialogue.
Thank you, Jaime. Later we are going to be coming back to the regional networks, and I feel a little bit more interested now in things that we can see you so emotionally talking about. Now I'm going to get also very what we want to know is, I would like to hear more about your project, because it happens in this, you're talking about different international agreements regarding the energy, and so you're proposing that from the university point of view. Yes. Before we start talking about this importance of this platform and cooperation, I would like to point this out. When we're talking about the integration, regional integration, what I was talking about in a previous question, we, in all the studies that have been done for the process of the regional integration, is this part of the study of the approach, of the content of the agreement. We don't know how we can progress or what this energetic integration process regionally is like. So we only know what has been written in these agreements, and from the academic and governmental and business point of view is very important. It's important to cooperate and to know what has been cooperated up to now, and so that we can comment on this platform that is called Platform Matrix. And here is the Professor Yuri Paiva, who is the creator, and he came up with this idea, and it's a group of study over the energy safety, and this platform offers the solution that we are missing so that we can comprehend what has been agreed upon up till now, in which areas are countries from the region cooperating, not just the regional countries, but globally. We can get these different blocks. We can see it from the BRICS, from the European community, etc. But we are still missing a lot so that we can continue with these regional energy procedures. We can understand these agreements that had been signed between Brazil and Argentina, between Argentina and Chile, because they exchange a lot of natural gas. So in many sources of the energy and lots of technical cooperation and science cooperation, industry cooperation topics. So we can see that there are lots of elements that are related with the energy in nuclear energy that we can also run into these different sources, and it has a lot of possibilities to grow in the region, and we need to have this stable supply and safe supply. So there are lots of things that we need to understand, and this tool is what it's doing, is helping us to understand how we can work with these specific elements of so what we are also doing with these tools, such as artificial intelligence, that we can have a chat box that could help offering solutions to those. How many agreements have then been between different countries, in which areas, what areas are missing still, and the areas that have very few agreements regarding the hydrogen, so that we can understand these agreements and treaties when we're talking internationally, and regulating frameworks, and lawyers who understand more about this, so that we can understand this, and it's essential so that we can continue making progress. And this idea also about the regional agreement, about how we can have convergences, regulatory convergences, so that we can understand what has happened in the past, so that we can create an agreement that is going to be used by the regional countries, institutions, or intergovernmental or international organizations, so that we can make progress efficiently. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for showing me that the time is running. I don't know if this is a threat. We only have 4 minutes left, so yeah. They told us it's up till 11, no? Okay, so this conversation is very interesting, but 11 panel starts at 11. You can stay if you want to continue talking about that. You can take a small break. So we're just going to ask Jaime, Astrid, if we Google platform metrics, we are going to find it. Yes, very easy. So it's a platform metrics. So we're going to go back to this rivalry about the energy efficiency, and I want to talk about these regional frameworks. So I can imagine who is now consulting, and you give us who's providing the consultancy there. Well, in the region, and let's talk about Latin America. That you can't see the clock there, but it's really causing me anxiety, because they're telling me they're counting down the time that I have left. But so if we were just center at the Latin American region, we are living in the areas, we are the pace-keeping area, but we are the most violent area when we talk about national and internal violence. So our efforts are not just to reach the peace, but to also cooperate in these fundamental aspects. So we have to find these efforts because with these different efforts are always talking about particular efforts of certain countries. So when it didn't result, for example, President Piñera with President Budu tried to do something regarding that. But the point is that if we indeed want to protect and we want to develop all our energetic sources, we do need these regional agreements that go beyond cooperation regarding production distribution. But before that, we need to have the protection and respect among countries so they can reach the cooperation. And that's the multilateralism is not working in Latin America. And that's the first dialogue that we need to have, because if we later want to have the real cooperation in the energy matters, we have to agree upon the basic elements, because the elements of the production that we have among our countries, including the energetic topics, between Peru and Colombia, Colombia and Ecuador, consider that the borders between Chile and Argentina have solar panels, and they had to be put at the different other side of the border, so the small village in Argentina couldn't get the solar power. So we have to create these instances where we can create dialogue at the regional level so that we can reach this cooperation in the energy, and we get to this electric cooperation. We can go to achieve the energy and also oil that needs to be shared between countries that are producing it and that are buying. So we have to be one step ahead of time. We have to discuss the frameworks of the safety and the mutual respect so this exchange can happen, because if it doesn't happen, we have just a series of useless tools that don't have any enforcement, and that finally what is creating is the increase of frustration among the political and technical actors in this. So multilateralism, first of all, has to come back because it's not existing at the moment, and then it has to come over the basic elements so that we can build upon that basis. And that's where the future is. So what would be the framework? I think you are Mexican, so I'm not going to get into discussion South America, Latin America, because that's the discussion between Mexico and Brazil. The discussion has to be at different levels, and there the geometry and the relationship between different countries. Where is Chile? Chile is in South America, but it's also South Pacific country, and lots of our dialogue, multilateral dialogues, it's with Oceania and the South Pacific, and the exchange that we have with Australia in defense, in energy, not even talking about the mining. So we could be at different places at the same time, but I think that first we need to talk about the framework, and I know that we have to think about Latin American and not South American framework, because Latin American framework, not that it's more important than South American, but there is a cultural part that is challenged, and that's Latin American. We don't have a joint view to face those challenges. So I would start with Latin America, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't consider the South Pacific and South Atlantic. And many countries invite each other to be there. And we have to think about these different frameworks, and this one, South Cap, etc. But we have to consider, if we don't have Latin American framework within which we are all going to fit, and SNAP is a great tool, but it's not necessarily well used, and becomes only the political dialogue without any technical political depth. So we have to think in these different types, not against United States of America or against Canada, but together with them, because otherwise we won't have the strength to dialogue with them, and we have to propose it. It's worse, it has to be dialogue with the United States, with Argentina, not against them. This is not resistance or heritage. This is the strength to have a dialogue. So the energy that we should start from to create a larger cooperation frameworks. Thank you very much, Astrid and Jaime, for this great panel and very interesting topic. I am sorry that that another panel is starting, so you won't have even 5 minutes to grab some coffee. So thank you for this amazing topic, and let's finish here. Thank you very much. And now we are inviting you to get together so that we can have a photo together before you get off the stage. So here we are going to do that.